Hello everyone, I am the Jack Bond Sleep Story and I am here to help you today. I know you. You will see this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Get comfortable and relax. I never thought a cheap motel could be the setting for the most terrifying night of my life, but as I lay here in the dark listening to the footsteps outside my door, I realize how wrong I was. It all started when my car broke down on the outskirts of a small town I'd never heard of. The sun was setting and I knew I needed to find a place to stay for the night. That's when I saw the flickering neon sign of the Pinewood Motel. Its vacancy light a beacon of hope in the growing darkness. As I pulled into the parking lot, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The place looked run down, with peeling paint and overgrown weeds put in through cracks in the asphalt, but beggars can't be choosers, and I was desperate for a bed in a hot shower. The bell above the office door jangled as I stepped inside. The smell of stale cigarettes and musty carpets hit me like a wave. Behind the counter stood a man who looked like he'd seen better days. His greasy hair hung in limp strands around a face that seemed permanently set in a skull. Need a room, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The man's eyes roamed over me, lingering a bit too long for comfort. Just you, he asked, his voice rough as sandpaper. I nodded, suddenly wishing I wasn't alone. He handed me a key attached to a faded plastic tag. Room 13, he said, the ghost of a smirk playing on his lips. Lucky you. As I walked to my room, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on my back. IGL glanced over my shoulder, catching a glimpse of curtains quickly closing in one of the other rooms. My skin prickled with unease. The room was about what I expected: small, musty, with furniture that had seen better decades, but it was a place to sleep, and that's all I needed. I dropped my bag on the bed and headed for the shower, hoping the hot water would wash away the tension knotting my shoulders. The pipes groaned and sputtered before finally producing a weak stream of lukewarm water. As I was rinsing my hair, I could have sworn I heard the door to my room open and close. My heart leapt into my throat. I shut off the water and listened, hardly daring to breathe. Silence. Cautiously I peeked out of the bathroom. The room was empty, exactly as I'd left it. I must have imagined it, I told myself, but I couldn't quite believe it. I quickly dried off and got dressed, unable to shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. As night fell, the motel came alive with strange sounds. Footsteps paced back and forth in the room above me. Voices murmured in the parking lot, too low to make out words, but charged with an intensity that made me uneasy. Occasionally I'd hear a thump or a muffled cry from somewhere nearby, setting my nerves on edge. I tried to distract myself by watching TV, but the ancient set only picked up 2 channels, both filled with static. I flipped through a dog-eared magazine left in the nightstand drawer, but the articles were outdated and uninteresting. Sleep seemed impossible, but I knew I needed to rest if I was going to deal with my car in the morning. Just as I was about to turn off the light, I heard a knock at my door. I froze, my hand halfway to the lamp switch. Who could it be at this hour? The knock came again, more insistent this time. Hello, I called out, my voice sounding small and scared in the quiet room. No answer, just another knock. Heart pounding, I approached the door. Through the peephole I could see a woman standing outside. She looked ordinary enough, middle-aged, with graying hair pulled back in a messy bun, but there was something in her eyes, a wild, desperate Look that made me hesitate, please, she said, her voice muffled through the door. I need help, let me in. Every instinct screamed at me to keep the door closed, but what if she really was in trouble? I undid the chain and opened the door a crack. What's wrong? I asked, ready to slam it shut at the first sign of danger. The woman's eyes darted around nervously. They're coming, she whispered. We have to get out of here now. Before I could respond, she pushed past me into the room. I stumbled back, shocked by her sudden movement. She immediately went to the window, peeking out through the curtains. Who's coming? I demanded, fear and confusion battling for dominance in my mind. What's going on? She turned to me, her face pale in the dim light. You don't know? She asked, disbelief coloring her tone. How long have you been here? I just checked in this evening, I said, growing more uneasy by the second my car broke down. The woman laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. Oh honey, she said, shaking her head. That's how they get you. Your car didn't break down by accident. Here is the continuation. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean? She opened her mouth to answer but froze as the sound of footsteps echoed outside, heavy, deliberate steps that stopped right in front of my door. They're here, she whispered, her eyes wide with terror. The doorknob began to turn slowly. I realized with horror that in my confusion I hadn't relocked the door after letting the woman in. She grabbed my arm, pulling me towards the bathroom. Quick, she hissed, we have to hide. We crammed ourselves into the tiny bathroom, barely daring to breathe as we heard the room door open. Heavy footsteps entered the room, accompanied by the sound of drawers being opened and furniture being moved. Where are they? A gruff voice demanded. Not here. Another voice answered. Check the next room. The footsteps retreated and the door closed. I let out a shaky breath, realizing I'd been holding it. What the hell is going on? I whispered to the woman. She put a finger to her lips, shaking her head. After a few moments of tense silence, she spoke, her voice barely audible. This isn't just a motel, she said, it's a trap. They lure in travelers, people who won't be missed. And then she trailed off, swallowing hard. And then what? I pressed, though I wasn't sure. I wanted to know the answer. They take them, she said simply. Sell them, kill them for sport, use them for God knows what. I'd been trying to escape for weeks. My mind reeled, struggling to process what she was saying. It sounded insane, like something out of a horror movie, but the fear in her eyes, the sounds I'd heard, the strange behavior of the staff, it all started to fit together in a terrifying picture. We have to get out of here, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. She nodded. There's a window in the back behind the dumpsters. If we can make it there, we might have a chance. Slowly, cautiously, we emerged from the bathroom. The room was a mess, drawers pulled out and mattress overturned. They had searched thoroughly but thankfully hadn't thought to check the bathroom. We crept to the door, listening intently for any sound of movement outside. Hearing nothing, we slipped out into the night. The parking lot was eerily quiet, the only sound the faint buzz of the neon sign. We stuck to the shadows, making our way around the edge of the building towards the back. Just as the dumpsters came into view, a shout rang out behind us. There they are. We ran, no longer caring about stealth. I could hear heavy footsteps pounding after us, gaining ground quickly. The woman reached the window first. Struggling to push it open, I turned to look behind us and saw three men running towards us, their faces twisted with rage. With a final heave, the window creaked open. The woman scrambled through, then turned to help me. I was halfway through when I felt a hand grasp my ankle. I kicked wildly, connecting with something solid. The grip loosened and I tumbled through the window onto the ground outside. We ran into the woods behind the motel, branches whipping at our faces as we crashed through the underbrush. I could hear our pursuers crashing through the trees behind us, but their voices grew fainter as we put distance between us. After what felt like hours, we finally stopped, gasping for breath. In the faint pre-dawn light, I could see a road ahead. We had made it. As we walked towards the road, hoping to flag down a passing car, the woman turned to me. I'm Sarah, she said, offering a tired smile. Alice, I replied, still trying to process everything that had happened. Thank you, Alice, Sarah said softly. I couldn't have made it out alone. I nodded, words failing me. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds, I realized how close I had come to never seeing another dawn. The Pinewood Motel faded into the distance behind us, but I knew its horrors would haunt my dreams for years to come. Here is the next part of the text. The neon sign of Joe's Pizza flickered in the rearview mirror as I pulled away, the aroma of pepperoni and cheese filling my car. Little did I know that this routine delivery would lead me into a nightmare I never could have imagined. Sometimes the most terrifying journeys begin with the most innocent of destinations. It was a slow Tuesday night, and I was grateful for the ping of the delivery app. Any extra cash was welcome, especially with rent coming due. The address was unfamiliar, somewhere on the outskirts of town where the streetlights grew sparse and the houses were few and far between. I hummed along to the radio, my headlights cutting through the darkness as I navigated the winding country roads. The GPS directed me to turn onto a narrow gravel driveway, barely visible among the overgrown bushes. As I drove deeper into the property, the trees seemed to close in around me, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers. Finally, I spotted a house, if you could call it that. It was more like a dilapidated shack, its windows dark and its paint peeling. A single bulb flickered weakly above the front door, casting eerie shadows across the porch. I grabbed the pizza box and approached the house, gravel crunching under my feet. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the growing sense of unease, and knocked on the door. For a long moment, there was no response. I was about to knock again when I heard movement inside it. Slow, shuffling footsteps approached the door. It creaked open, revealing a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a horror movie. He was tall and gaunt, with wild, unkempt hair and a scraggly beard. His eyes, sunken deep in their sockets, fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Pizza delivery," I stammered, holding out the box. The man's face split into a grin, revealing yellow, crooked teeth. Yes, he said, his voice raspy. Come in, come in. I'll get your money." Every instinct screamed at me to turn and run, but I reminded myself that I was just being paranoid. It was just an odd old man in a creepy house, nothing to be afraid of. I stepped inside and immediately regretted it. The smell hit me first, a musty, sour odor that made my nose wrinkle. The interior was dimly lit and cluttered with stacks of newspapers and old furniture, creating a maze-like path through the room. "Just wait here," the man said, disappearing into another room. I stood awkwardly in the entryway, shifting my weight from foot to foot. My eyes darted around, taking in the strange decor. Faded photographs covered one wall, their subjects' eyes seeming to follow me. On a nearby table, I spotted something that made my blood run cold, a collection of newspaper clippings, all about missing persons in the area. The man returned, but instead of money, he held a gun. My heart leapt into my throat as he pointed it at me, that unsettling grin still plastered on his face. "Now," he said, his tone casual as if he were discussing the weather, "you're going to do exactly as I say." I raised my hand slowly, the pizza box falling to the floor with a dull thud. "Look, man," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't want any trouble. Just take my wallet and let me go." He laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Oh, I don't want your money, boy. You're going to help me with something far more important." He gestured with the gun, directing me further into the house. I had no choice but to comply, my mind racing with possible escape routes. We passed through a kitchen that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years, pots and pans piled high in the sink, before entering what appeared to be a study. The room was dominated by a large desk, covered in papers and strange-looking devices. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with old volumes and jars containing things I didn't want to examine too closely. "Sit," the man commanded, pointing to a chair in the corner. I sat, my legs feeling like jelly. "What do you want from me?" I asked, hating how my voice quavered. The man's eyes gleamed with a manic light. "You, my young friend, are going to help me get my revenge. You see, the owner of that pizza place you work for, Joe, he ruined my life." He launched into a long, rambling story about how Joe had supposedly cheated him out of his life savings, driven him to bankruptcy, and destroyed his family. With each word, his agitation grew, spittle flying from his lips as he gesticulated wildly with the gun. I listened in horror, realizing I was dealing with someone who had completely lost touch with reality. This wasn't just a robbery gone wrong, this was the lair of a madman with a grudge. "So you see," he concluded, leaning in close enough that I could smell his rancid breath, "Joe needs to pay. And you're going to help me make that happen." "How?" I asked, my mouth dry with fear. He grinned again, that terrible yellow grin. "You're going to call him. Tell him you've had car trouble and need him to come out here. And when he arrives..." He made a slashing motion across his throat. Here is the next part of the text. I felt sick. This lunatic wanted me to lure my boss to his death. I can't do that," I stammered. "Please, just let me go. I won't tell anyone about this, I swear." The man's face darkened. You don't have a choice, boy. You'll do as I say, or you'll never leave this house alive. He shoved a phone into my hands. With trembling fingers, I dialed Joe's number, praying he wouldn't answer. But after 3 rings, I heard his familiar voice. Hello? I swallowed hard, the man's gun pressed against my temple. Hey, Joe. It's Mike. I've had some car trouble out on Old Mill Road. Could you come give me a hand? There was a pause, and for a moment, I thought Joe might refuse. But then he sighed. All right, Mike. I'll be there in about 20 minutes. Sit tight. The call ended, and the man snatched the phone away, cackling with glee. Excellent, excellent, he crowed. Now we wait. The next 20 minutes were the longest of my life. The man paced back and forth, muttering to himself and occasionally stopping to peer out the window. I sat frozen in the chair, my mind racing. I knew I had to do something, but with the gun trained on me, any move seemed impossible. As the sound of an approaching car reached us, the man's excitement grew palpable. It's time, he hissed, grabbing my arm and yanking me to my feet. Remember, one wrong move, and you're dead. He dragged me to the front door, positioning me so that I was visible but keeping himself hidden behind it. I heard car doors slam, then footsteps on the gravel. Mike? Joe's voice called out. You out here, kid? I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. The man jabbed the gun into my ribs, and I managed to croak, over here, Joe. As Joe approached, I could see the confusion on his face. He was a good man, always fair to his employees. Whatever grudge this madman held against him, I knew it couldn't be justified. Just as Joe reached the porch, I made my decision. I couldn't let this happen. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, I shoved backward, catching my captor off guard. We tumbled to the floor in a tangle of limbs, the gun skittering across the wooden planks. Run, Joe! I yelled, struggling to keep the man pinned down. Call the police. Joe, to his credit, reacted quickly. He scooped up the gun and trained it on the man, his hand steady despite the shock evident on his face. What the hell is going on here? He demanded. The man beneath me had gone still, all the fight seeming to drain out of him now that he was disarmed. He began to sob, great heaving cries that shook his entire body. The police arrived within minutes, alerted by Joe's call. As they led the man away in handcuffs, I sat on the porch steps, my legs too shaky to stand. Joe sat beside me, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. You okay, kid? He asked, concern etching his features. I nodded, though I knew it would be a long time before I was truly okay. Yeah, I said. I don't think I'll be making any more deliveries for a while. Joe chuckled, a welcome sound after the night's horrors. I think you've earned a nice, long vacation. And a raise. As we watched the police cars drive away, their red and blue lights fading into the distance, I felt a mix of relief and lingering fear. The night's events had shown me how quickly an ordinary situation could turn into a nightmare. But it had also shown me my own strength, a resilience I didn't know I possessed. I knew the memory of this night would stay with me, a reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind closed doors. But as the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, I also felt a glimmer of hope. I had faced my worst fear and survived. Whatever came next, I knew I could handle it. The pizza, forgotten on the floor of that horrible house, had long since gone cold. But as Joe and I drove back to town, I found I had never been more grateful for a ruined delivery in my life. Here is the next part of the text. The snap of a twig under my boot echoed through the forest like a gunshot. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. That's when I saw them, shadowy figures moving between the trees, and I knew in that instant my leisurely hike had just become a fight for survival. It was supposed to be a simple weekend getaway. I'd been feeling stressed at work, and my therapist suggested I try spending some time in nature. Reconnect with the earth, she'd said, her voice soothing and reassuring. It'll do wonders for your anxiety. So here I was, 3 hours into a hike in the Cascade Mountains, my backpack full of trail mix and bottled water, and not another soul in sight. Or so I thought. The day had started beautifully, the sun filtered through the canopy of evergreens, dappling the forest floor with warm light. The air was crisp and clean, filled with the scent of pine and damp earth. I felt my worries melting away with each step, the rhythm of my boots on the trail becoming a meditation of sorts. I'd veered off the main path about an hour ago, drawn by the sound of rushing water. I found a pristine stream, its clear water bubbling over smooth rocks. I stopped to refill my water bottle, marveling at how clean and fresh it tasted compared to the tap water back home. That's when I heard its voices carried on the wind, too faint to make out words but clearly human. I felt a twinge of disappointment. I'd been enjoying the solitude, but I reminded myself that other hikers had just as much right to be here as I did. I shouldered my pack and started walking again, figuring I'd either catch up to the group ahead or they'd move on and I'd have the trail to myself again. But as I rounded a bend, I saw something that made me stop dead in my tracks. In a small clearing just off the trail, I saw a group of men. They weren't hikers. They wore dark clothes, and even from this distance, I could see they were armed. Surrounding them were crates, dozens of them. One was open, and I could see packages wrapped in brown paper inside. My brain struggled to process what I was seeing. This deep in the woods, this far from any road, it had to be something illegal, drugs, maybe, or weapons. My pulse quickened as I realized I was witnessing something I definitely wasn't supposed to see. I took a step backward, intending to quietly retrace my steps and get as far away from here as possible. That's when I stepped on the twig. The crack seemed to echo through the entire forest. The men's heads snapped in my direction. For a moment, we all froze, locked in a tableau of mutual surprise. Then one of them shouted, and they started moving towards me. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush with no regard for the trail or direction. All that mattered was putting distance between me and those men. I could hear them behind me, their shouts growing fainter as I ran but never disappearing entirely. My lungs burned and branches whipped at my face, but terror kept me moving. I don't know how long I ran. It could have been minutes or hours. Time seemed to lose all meaning in the green blur of the forest. Finally, when my legs felt like they were about to give out, I spotted a dense thicket of bushes. Without thinking, I dove in, ignoring the thorns that scraped my arms and face. I lay there, trying to quiet my ragged breathing, straining my ears for any sound of pursuit. For a long while, all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. Then, distantly, I heard voices again. "He couldn't have gotten far," one said, his voice gruff and angry. "Spread out," another responded. "He's got to be around here somewhere." I pressed myself closer to the ground, hardly daring to breathe. They were looking for me, and based on what I'd seen, I had a sickening feeling about what would happen if they found me. The voices grew closer, and I could hear the crunch of leaves underfoot. I closed my eyes, as if not seeing them could somehow prevent them from seeing me. "Check those bushes," a voice said, alarmingly close. I tensed, ready to bolt, though I knew it was hopeless. I was trapped. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the air, a loud electronic beeping. One of the men swore. "It's the perimeter alarm," he said. "Someone else is in the area." Another voice responded.